You're listening to The Public Debate on CHSR 97.9 FM. Today's episode, Should Countries Be Taking In More People? But both kicking us off and closing us out today is the band The Monoxides with their album, The Free Release of Energy. We'll be starting off with the song In Your Eyes and ending off with the song Something. Let's hit it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Public Debate. I'm your host, Gaia, joined here today by...
Bhavya Malhotra here.
And today we're coming to you with another debate. Today's topic, we're going to be discussing, should countries be taking in more or less immigrants, refugees, or migrants in the modern day? So, before we begin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Bhavya Malhotra. I'm a first year and currently going in my second year undergraduate UNB studies. And I'm doing a dual major in economics and English, but I'll be shifting over to business pretty soon. So, yeah.
Hasn't the business faculty renamed itself recently? It's a faculty of management now.
Faculty of management, yes, because like many of the buildings and the doors of business, faculty of business itself say faculty of management. Mm-hmm. So I think it was time for them to change the name.
Yeah, I feel kind of weird about that name change, honestly.
Me as well.
I feel like that doesn't hold as much weight as a degree of business administration.
It's particularly more focused, I'll say, towards one branch of business instead of any wide spectrum, I'll say.
Yeah, it is. It's a little bit focused.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, so today we are debating if countries should be taking in more immigrants, less immigrants, or possibly status quo, though we're trying to avoid that section of the debate. So I'm going to be taking the side that countries should be taking in more immigrants, more refugees, more people, or allowing people to take asylum in their countries. And you're going to be taking the side against
them, yeah.
Okay. It's always proper to state that we are not representing our actual beliefs in the show. We don't state this very often unless discussions get controversial.
Yeah.
We don't represent our own beliefs. We are here to represent a side of an argument and to try to get equal discussion on it, even if we might not be that part on that side of the discussion. So, before we begin, do you have any history with this topic? Any personal reasons for liking it?
Not any personal reasons, I'll say, but I think so. It's a topic that needs to be discussed in modern times, and like
Yeah.
how has it been an impactful thing over the centuries, and how it has itself transformed into the modern world. So it's a topic pretty worth noted and needs to be discussed.
A bit of a humanitarian topic. In this
Exactly.
case.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on my side, my history with it is obviously less direct. I am living in the country I was born in. I've only
Right.
moved a couple provinces over. I have traveled, but mostly within Canada. Actually, I've only left Canada once, which is very sad, but also expensive.
Yeah.
Which is the reason. But no. So I don't have much personal history with it, though. Of
Right.
course, my girlfriend is from Germany.
Oh.
I've mentioned this a few times on the show before. My girlfriend's, well, her family's from Germany. She was born
Right.
in Canada, but her family moved here like right before.
Right.
So my history kind of lies there, and also me being quite big on many humanitarian topics, such as the refugee crisis relatively recently.
Yeah.
I think that was like a big thing back in 2015, wasn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's been going on for a while, although
Yeah.
the public attention has really died down. It still is an issue.
Between 2017 and 2018, I think so it died down a bit, but recently, being the scenario in United States and the neighboring countries, it's the issue has come up to light again.
United States is now dealing with immigration and refugees and asylum seekers from
Exactly, yeah.
Mexico and Central America mainly.
Particularly Honduras and neighboring countries around it.
Yeah, I haven't looked too much into Honduras reason. What's going on there right now?
Many of the people are fleeing the country and like they're like basically taking in shelter in food trucks and any of the transportation facilities coming from their country to the United States, joining in from really miles and thousands of like miles of distance, and it's pretty. I'll say the situation itself is so, but pitiful because you can literally see children and people like being found in like on the in the most secluded places a human being can be, and then you think like what the condition of that person might be in their own country, as well as what their reasons might have or what the consequences had them to flee there and come to United States, because in the end everyone dreams of having a better life for themselves and their children. United States itself guarantees that come live in our country, have the American dream, but on the other hand, the president itself says, "Oh no, you can't because you're not a part of our country. You are not a natural
And
born
apparently
citizen."
a large part of the population as well.
Exactly.
Seeing
Yeah.
as the president made it then. Or POTUS, as some people call him.
Exactly. So the president itself should look into the matter like the country is not built by just the natural born citizens.
Yeah, it's definitely a big situation. Do you know what triggered the refugee crisis from Honduras? Like, was it a government uprising or?
I'm not much thorough with that fact, I would say, but yeah, I'll say I have not recently much research over that reason, like why the uprising was all of a sudden and immediate led to all these consequences. But if I remember, like having a slight idea about it, it was mostly because of the government tensions and. I remember reading about an article like many of the people there, like they weren't able to facilitate the basic amenities for themselves as well as for their families.
Yeah.
So that's why they took refuge. They wanted to take refuge in the United States.
Yeah, countries like Honduras, El Salvador, and a few others have actually been basically controlled by a few singular companies for the past about 50 years, I think. Well, not entirely controlled. It's been basically that situation. So it doesn't surprise me that something would have triggered everyone to have to feel the need to leave. Probably it might even be a situation where a few people decided they had enough and started leaving, and people just started following them.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, a bit of a domino effect. So,
exactly.
I guess that brings us into where we are today.
Sure.
So that's a pretty good introduction for the topic, actually, of our personal feelings on it.
Yeah.
And so with that, I guess I'll segue into my reasons for why we should be allowing more people into our countries.
Sure.
So it's a privileged point to be able to say that my country or Canada and the United States, Europe, are able to provide amenities for for many people that many countries cannot. It is very much a point of privilege. I can't speak to say that we can offer healthcare and education and transport and food, water, clothing, housing, etc. that many countries in other continents cannot. Just looking at the continents like South America and some areas, I know some South American countries are doing quite well. Areas like a lot of Africa, even some Southeastern Asian countries and Northern Asian countries and many other Asian countries actually. So many districts in Asia. It's so large.
It's too large, yeah.
But there's many countries that can't provide for citizens as much. And we in countries with such privilege have an excess of resources in many areas that we don't know how to do with entirely, besides throwing it at our armies and throwing it at government bickering and bureaucracy and red tape. That we do have plenty of space as well. Like here, look at Canada. Canada is the second largest country on Earth in landmass. And even though a lot of it is cold, to say the least, it doesn't mean we're not uninhabitable. Now we have a lot of space to let in a lot more people and a lot of room to grow. And and I see it almost as our right to do so. If it's not humanitarian, it's not ethical to allow people in other countries who are going through such issues to be barred into their country, to turn their home where they were born, where their families live, into a cage that they can't leave. It's not right. It's not ethical when we have so much here in excess that is not present in other countries. There's also the fact that other countries suffer due to poor leadership, right? They suffer due to uprisings. They suffer due to tyrannical governments. Governments that care more about keeping themselves and the direct subordinates in power instead of the people, because they don't rely on the people, so the people can suffer. 1984 by George Orwell explains this quite well already. You only need to keep your keys to power in power for you to survive. There's a good book on this, The Dictator's Handbook. That's one. Really recommend it as well. But it explains how to stay in power, you only need to keep your keys in power, or your keys to power, or to stay in power, you need to keep your keys to power in power. I hate that's the worst statement I've ever made. But that's what it is. The people who keep you in control, you need to make sure they stay in a position where they can keep you in control.
Exactly.
And that they're happy with you. So you're not going to give money to the populace that could be spent on keeping your power. But the populace suffers due to this, and a lot of countries are going through that issue. When we have the ability to help them, we have the ability to give education and resources that could eventually go back to that country. And let's be honest, a lot of people who say we shouldn't take in more migrants say we should be sending money to these countries, but money we send to these countries doesn't go to the people. It goes to the government, which gets the money goes to the keys to keep them in power, right? It never reaches the populace who need the help, and because of that, it's not beneficial. It's not going to help. It's not going to do anything except dehumanize them and say that we're doing good when we're doing nothing at all, right? We have the ability to help people in our countries, and there's almost no reason why not to, instead of condemning people to die, right? So that's my main reason. There are others, but I think this is the most important one, that if we're not doing it, we're turning against ourselves in a way.
Also, you have touched a good point of the topic, like people should always go and reach for help for the countries that can help themselves. But I'll say majority of the fact itself is like which of the countries are able to help themselves, and are the countries because many of the countries think that they might be capable to help these people, but in the end it turns out they are not. Plus, I don't think so. It needs to be an added pressure or a certain compulsory attribute for the countries themselves to accept these people. It's must be upon their decision. But like in the world, it's circulated as a fact that okay, if a country people from like say again from like Honduras are fleeing to the United States, then it's a responsibility of the United States itself to take care of those people. People always circulate that fact as a notion, but it should not be. If the United States itself, if the United States itself thinks like, okay, they cannot take care of these people, and like they cannot handle their citizenship or any of the problems or any of the consequences that these people bring with themselves, then I'll say it's a perfectly accepted fact if they are saying no to them. And if like I talk about as you talked about Canada, if I talk about my home country in India, instead of even having the problem of immigrants, migrants, and refugees coming from outside the countries, we have had problems from within states itself. had there been any particular state uprisings or any of the famines or any natural disaster consequences, people are fleeing from one state to another, even though there is no any federal law prohibiting citizens to travel amongst the states in the country. But there have been state governments that have reluctantly denied that, okay, we cannot take care of these people and they need to go out because of all the crime rates and all the illegal activities that they're bringing with themselves into our states, let alone the country itself. Recently, you must have been familiar with the Rohingya issue, circling around the refugees coming from Bangladesh and Myanmar. So the basic reason of refusing them refuge in the country itself is because in the past, when the country has done that, it has led to worse consequences. So I'll say if a country has the particular say in this matter of saying no or denying the fact, then I'll say we should respect that stance instead of just looking down upon it and criticizing them.
Yeah. It's a good point to say that a country should be allowed to control its own borders. But it does run into the issue now that when people are talking about you should vote because what if everyone says they won't vote? Who's the people you might want in power might not get in power because you made the choice not to go vote. Yeah. For reference, you guys should go vote. But that's the exact situation that even though, yes, you have the choice not to vote, when everyone chooses not to do it, you run into massive issues. And I think that's another thing we need to recognize is that while every country does have right to its own borders, there becomes a point where having every country say no will throw these people back into their cage that I mentioned before. It'll throw them back into even possibly the firing line if you look at like Syria, for example, where they're risking their own lives. And it almost becomes a situation that while countries need to control their own borders, there needs to be a way for helping these people when they need help. And in my personal beliefs, the UN is the best way to do this. Right. That the UN could, obviously UN camps that have been set up are not always the best because they're usually monitored by these countries that don't want the people in the first place. Yeah. Which Australia's had some problems with that. I think so. Yeah. Was that recent that it happened in Australia?
It was recent. Yeah.
Yeah. So like countries definitely have issues with it, but it's definitely a room it's definitely an area where we have room to grow, where the UN could be the arbiter in the situation of helping distribute people where they could go and helping protect them. And in that case, giving money would suddenly become a lot better because the money is going to someone who is actively helping instead of going to a government which is not. Right? The UN is known for trying its best, even though it can't really tell countries what to do. It definitely has the room to help people. And that's kind of what it's always been best at. So that's definitely one area that would work. But it does still stand that if we don't let people in, we're sentencing them possibly to death. But ignoring the ethical side, because in the end, this ethical side is a circular debate, by all means. If you look at a debate like the abortion debate, there's always the discussion between does a woman have control over her own body or is it killing someone? And it sounds very similar to what I'm saying here. I'm saying we are dooming someone to die, so we need to take away autonomy of a country or a person's control of themselves, right? Which has its issue. Right. So we need to go onto other grounds. For me to stand in this, I need to go onto other grounds, which I think a good place for me to stand is economic. Yeah. Right? Now, it's no surprise that a lot of countries either have a few too many workers and a few too few jobs, right? But there's definitely an economic benefit to letting in refugees if you're prepared for it. Now, this is where the UN would have to come in and help countries prepare, which it is quite willing to. It's definitely shown in the past that it's willing to help countries set up. But there's an economic benefit to letting in people like this if you also put in place the encouragements for making small businesses, right? This is always the big one I quote, is that people coming in to a country have a tendency to stick together, which makes sense. You're in an unfamiliar location with unfamiliar people and unfamiliar rules. You're going to stick with what you know because that's safe, right? So a lot of people tend to stick together, and where they stick together, when managed correctly, tends to be a hot spot for new business, right? For new goods and services, for money that you can make taxes off of, etc., right? So when you play your cards right, there's a lot of room for letting migrants or immigrants or refugees come in. Because if you encourage them to be setting up their own businesses and entering the workforce, and maybe even areas where the current citizens don't want to work, it's always a dark outlook to say there's jobs people don't want, let's give them to people coming in the country. But letting people coming into the country have the option of accepting these jobs that we might not have enough people for would possibly be a big benefit, right? There's such jobs as, I know it's going to sound menial, but there's such jobs as cleaning the environment, which is a very necessary job that no one wants to do. But I have no doubts that if someone's coming to the country and is looking for a job that they need, that's a possible job for them. And sure, there will be a point where they'll say, I don't want to do this anymore, and they can move on to other jobs. But there might be someone else who needs the job then, and this person's enfranchised enough to work on in bettering their own life, which is a win-win situation in the end. They get to come to the country they want to and get work, and we get something done that we don't have getting done now, right? So there's an economic benefit, and I guess an environmental benefit if you go down my route. But there's a possible economic benefit to having more people if you do prepare your country to accept them, which is a good reason to start preparing. Because if you play your cards right, this is a population boost and an economic boost.
I'll say about dealing the fact that you said people coming in the country and following the rules and regulations of the host country itself. I'll say, but in the past that has been quite an issue where people think that they can operate and work according to their own rules and their own ideologies that they had in their own country instead of the country that is hosting them. Because many of the refugees and migrants think like, okay, if we are sticking together in a particular community or like being a part of the same community in any foreign land, then the ideology tends to develop like thinking or acting not according to what the government or what the country itself wants from you, but rather than your any previous ideology. And then then that gives birth to the clash between, okay, what needs to be followed and what is being followed.
Right.
And as you said, like upon the scenario of economic jobs, I'll say countries like many of the Southeastern Asian countries, like I'll take again the example of India, where I'm coming from, a nation with 1.3, I'll say now might be my 1.4 billion people.
A lot.
A lot. You won't believe that 28% of the youth is in today's world is still unemployed, and India marks as the country having the highest population of the youth in their country, and yet having the highest population of youth which is still unemployed. Letting alone the fact that we let in the refugees again would only increase the population and still have and would only stagger the numbers of people being unemployed. We have a sector which we have the whole country divided into the rural and urban sector. Even if we provide jobs in the rural sector itself, then we are cutting those jobs for even the basic farmers that are growing crops for our own country, let alone those farmers themselves, even in today's date, are committing suicide. Why? Because the government is not providing them enough funds or loans, or don't have their back when it comes to economic crisis. And they are the backbone of our country.
Yeah. India has a very unique problem there because most countries have a relatively small population, but then you have India, which India, you can always make the argument taking in 1 million people won't change anything population-wise. Right. That's like what 0.4% of the population is like 1 million people. That's insane. Like we only have 33 million here in Canada.
Exactly.
That's 3.3 repeating percent of our population in. Just coming in for you, it's not a dent. Yeah. So that's always a very weird argument on India's side because economically there would be very little change unless you take in a lot of people, but you have so many people already to take care of. It's completely different. And this is, to me, that's also a good reason why countries here in the West especially need to be opening their doors. Because a country like India is willing to open its doors when it's in such a problem already, in such a problematic situation already. When you have countries like Canada, which took in 50,000. Actually, we didn't even reach that 50,000 goal. We took in like 35,000, right? And that's an insane disparity. You look at countries like Turkey, for example, or how about I think Lebanon took in 2 million. Lebanon has a population of 12 million. That's insane. Yeah. That's almost 10% of its. That's actually more than 10% of its population.
Than 10%,
in a couple of years, and we're looking at all these countries which are weaker and smaller and less developed by nature because they haven't had the time and ability and funds to develop themselves. But countries that are able to handle this type of influx are not taking in the people and they could take in to ease these resources, which is a very unique issue because if we were to take in these people, well, yeah, it would help multiple countries then. And we do have room to grow economically. We have a growing economy. We have tons of funds, and we have governments with tons of debt that are willing to take on more debt to grow their funds.
Yeah.
Right? A country like Canada could do with setting up new communities. We could do with setting up even new cities, having new population centers. Like, I know it could be possibly a terrible idea, but there's always the idea of taking in a lot of people and creating a community for them to have like a self-contained economy, a chance to possibly even a rural area to build themselves up, right? And it's risky because we did that with the native population and it didn't go well, but there's tons of areas with resources that do need people working in them. Even something as creating a small forestry town could be possible.
I'd say in this particular matter, the people have a much more say rather than the government itself, because if the people themselves would be living amongst the people coming in from any foreign land, are the government should make sure of it, or like notice, are the people living in harmony or not? Because
That's very important.
Exactly, because most of the I'll say conflicts or any hate towards immigrants and refugees itself has been in the past because people having different and clashing ideologies don't get along. They don't. That is why they don't want people from any foreign land to come into their country and dictate them how to lead their lives, instead of them extending a helping hand towards the refugees who are coming in their country. So I'll say in this matter, the population has a fairly much more say as compared to the government itself. I can always believe like the government needs to evaluate what resources and what things need to be provided and how they need to be calculated and effectively, provided to the people. But the ones who are living with each other, ones who we would see on every daily basis, we need to make sure are those people acceptable or not to us?
Yeah. And I guess another big thing, this is more of a neutral point, is this is something I believe many countries should do, is when people come into the country, it might be important to give them cultural education for Canada.
Exactly.
Not like assimilation, because we've tried that in the past. That didn't go well, just put it lightly. But teaching people coming in the cultural location with publicly provided education, right? I'm the type of person who says we should have free parenting classes for anyone who needs them, even if they're online, right? Where if you're having a kid, the government sends you resources to help you and like tells you, here's some websites, here's some YouTube videos, here's some parenting skills, right? I believe when you're coming into a country, that should be, I guess, a required part to get your citizenship, because you can get permanent resident status relatively easily, right? That's always the first step. You get in, you have it, right?
Yeah.
But to gain your citizenship, allowing people are saying that, even making it a requirement to just watch these videos and like attend maybe not even attend classes, that might be a little much, but like just provide you videos and books and resources and
having a basic knowledge about what the thing is, right?
Yeah. Because get into Canada, you need to intellectually know it, but you might not emotionally understand it.
Yeah, right? That's what my point was. Like, you can always be like Canadian by mind, but not by heart.
Yeah. So giving people the space to grow and develop a Canadian identity of their own by heart could be quite important. And this comes into something really important. And it's a bit of a tangent, but it is important that a lot of communities in Canada are either run by a church, as like the community life itself is church focused, or not really there beyond parties.
Right.
And I think that's a big issue, that communities either have to be religious or like not under one religion, or they don't really have community events that allow them to bond and allow them to grow as a community. And I think if we had these events, we would see a lot less domestic issues as well as issues from taking in people, and that would give people coming in the room to grow and develop and learn about living in Canada in a very peaceful, friendly manner, without even making it mandatory, just allowing that to be an option when they're coming in, to let them know about these events.
I'll say not upon the point of being it mandatory, but people who are coming in the country and want and should need to know about the values and the culture and the basic environment that they would be start to living in. Many of them don't even want to don't want that. They just I won't point towards any particular direction, but many of them just have the ideology. Okay, we just need to live in a peaceful and country which we can call home. Yeah. But they want to call it like they want to make their home, not like live in a community or interact with the people who are the permanent and actual residents of that country itself, and would want to like basically operate or like function on their own or just in a small community instead of being a part of the whole society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true, and that's a very important thing. It's why you see places like Chinatown existing, for example.
Exactly, yeah.
But it's still good to have these events existing anyway for
Exactly.
people who want to reach out. Because breaking down barriers and allowing people to grow as people, as in a friendly, peaceful manner, ignoring that it's something Canada's quite good at already, is very important. That a lot of people do come to countries kind of almost scared. And if it's not scared, it's not wanting to deal with having to basically change your identity, right?
I'll say upon that discussion, that is where there's a disparity between Canada and the United States.
Yeah.
The fear and the emotion of are you being welcomed or are you even a part of this country?
Yeah.
Because even though if you get the permanent residence or even you are a legal citizen, but in the end, if you're frowned upon being someone who's not a part of the country, someone who's not who's from the outside, someone who is a refugee, you just get marginalized and get a title, and that remains and scars you for the rest of your life.
It really does.
And then you feel like, okay, my situation is just the worst now. Is actually worse now because the rest of the life that I was depending or hoping to be better, or like to make myself a better life, that actually has gone into drain now.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing where I say I like Canada over the U.S.
Exactly.
I have many reasons to like Canada over the U.S.
Me too.
Ignoring my bias, but that's definitely one big area that the U.S. doesn't really have a society for accepting people coming in. That's almost not even just a government issue, but a societal issue itself. That the people aren't willing to accept more coming in.
Not even the government issue, but the incidents and the, I'll say, tragedies that have happened in the past are the reasons that they have appointed such a staunch approach instead of being having a liberal approach.
Yeah.
And I say their stance itself is justified because in the end, if they were the ones who are having like exclusively telling, okay, if people are not able to live in harmony, then we would would not accept them in the first place, and yet alone then people are immigrating illegally and then becoming citizens of the United States, and then you again come to know about any news of them committing crimes towards the citizens, then the stance of the country is justified of not letting them in.
And there's always the worry of having a biased viewpoint, which I think is like the biggest issue with the United States right now.
Yeah.
Is they've undergone some pretty bad tragedies. The four planes hitting their buildings in one day.
Exactly.
With only one plane missing. That's one aiming for the Pentagon. The White House and the Pentagon were attacked. Which one? The White House.
The White House.
Yeah.
The
Pentagon hit.
The Pentagon got hit.
Yeah.
They wanted to hit White House.
Yeah, that's what it was. And I understand a lot of people taking a viewpoint that these people coming in are bad, and I understand that they are unhappy about it. But
Sorry. I'll say it's never good to pinpoint any particular religion or a particular community and coding themselves as these people are bad, because like then it progresses a stigma amongst amongst the population. Okay, we should not be near or we should not be close to these people, because like I've even back in India I've seen movies in which they portray how people go through such a mental and physical harassment just because some people of their own religion have committed a crime, and that has been, which is heinous and caused such a big tragedy in the world. And then you think, oh, okay, what needs to be done?
Yeah.
Would these people be again accepted in the country or not?
And it makes sense that the population immediately thinks, this type of person did the attack. This type of person must be bad. It takes a pretty strong mental position to not think like that.
That is why we have such things called Islamophobia in today's world. I mean, come on.
Yeah, and a really common thing is most Sikhs get targeted by Islamophobia when they're not Islamic. Like the leader of the New Democratic Party here in Canada is a Sikh, and he gets targeted by Islamic hate all the time when it's well known he's not Islamic, right? And at no point has he ever stopped and said, I'm not a Muslim, because he takes the heat because he has the room to help the people attacking him learn to stop. And instead of shoving this onto other people who are being targeted already, he has the freedom and the peace of mind to help with, because he's not being targeted as often.
I recently watched. Thank you for bringing that up. I recently watched a debate of Gurrathan Singh. He's a member of parliament in Canada, and the basic motivation of the basic motive of his debate was itself like people tend to formulate ideas and tend to group certain people according to according to their name or how they look like, which should not be the case.
Yeah, it's always a lot more issues.
Yeah.
Right? And I think the difference in Canada and America is Canada, since Prime Minister Mackenzie King from back in, actually no, Lester B. Pearson. No?
Lester B. Pearson.
Was it Pearson? Who was the one who started peacekeeping? Was it Pearson?
I think so.
I think it was Pearson.
I think so.
He was late
Pearson,
1800s or something. No, he was early 1900s. Was he?
Oh,
he was.
He was a mid 1900s, I'll say, a little.
Oh yeah, no, he was like 1962.
1958 to 1962, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I we don't learn this stuff in school.
If I remember, like before coming to Canada, reading about him because like because I saw the name of the airport itself in Toronto, Lester B. Pearson Airport. I was like, that's a fun name. I just when Google it, it was like, okay, it's from like upon the first prime minister's name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lester B. Pearson is the most important figure in Canadian history.
Exactly.
He's way above John A. Macdonald, who founded the country.
Yeah.
He's above Pierre Trudeau, the father of current Justin Trudeau, who's one of the
Yeah.
most influential prime ministers of all time.
Exactly.
He's above Mackenzie King, one of my favorite prime ministers. He was a prime minister during World War II.
Right.
He had an issue known as the King Bing thing. You can't beat that.
Right.
Because it was Mackenzie King and I think John Byng, and he asked John Byng to close government for an election. John Byng
Right.
said no, and then we almost went to war with the British Empire over
Oh.
it, which is like pretty big,
Pretty
but
big.
very funny to think about now
Yeah.
because it was really dramatic. But on topic, I think that's a big difference between Canada and America is we've have this history of peacekeeping, of respecting others, and defining our identity by multiculturalism. When America, for most of its history, its identity has been getting rid of the minority people in their country, the natives, right? And forcing their influence onto other countries. Even just through World War II, countries like Turkey and Europe, which had the what was the rebuilding program in Europe? And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where they rebuilt Europe after World War I and World War II.
Yeah.
Where they put nukes in many countries, where they installed their own governments, right? I think that's an important thing, that America's opinion has always been, you accept what we are, and Canada's opinion has always been, we'll accept you for who you are.
The basic reason I'll say for that ideology is U.S. The ideology of a country is based upon what the people think, and much more relative to what is the government able to understand what people think.
Yeah.
Rather than in the United States itself, it's much more oriented towards what the president thinks. At the end of the term, what the new president would think, that is how we'll govern the country. That should not be the case.
No.
Which is going on in the United States.
Yeah, even Canada has some issues with that more
Exactly,
recently.
yeah. I'll say most of the countries suffered because of that issue. Because
A figurehead.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
That should not be but
Democracy is exactly against that idea.
exactly, yeah. Because like if a particular person, let alone the world leader of one of the most powerful countries in the world, thinks of a certain point, it does not mean that point itself needs to be correct.
No.
It should be debated and thrown down if it is not correct on moral grounds. But upon the issue of immigration and refugees, I'll say the point for him is justified. It's not one that he himself is belligerently or excessively exposing because he does not like someone. Because I think so. In most of his speeches, the ones that I've recently heard, you must have noticed Trump does not particularly in the starting of the speech particularly singles out any the neighboring countries around which the refugees are coming. His main ideology is focused towards a particular religion, which was the reason that there was the 7 Nation ban and all that stuff.
Oh man, that ban! It took so many tries for them to get it through, and
Yeah.
it wasn't worth it.
So his ideology has mostly been motivated from the religion. He doesn't even mention the neighboring countries through which these people were coming in and getting their citizenship in the United States until recently, when the crimes and all this tragedies and public violence grew so much in the United States that it needed his attention and him being pointing out, okay, it's enough.
Yeah.
People who are doing it are not part of are not our natural citizens, and they need to know how we govern the country, and violence in itself in any day is not acceptable.
Yeah. And it comes to a really important point that, like, I know we've kind of even left a lot of the debate now
Yeah, no
because
problem.
we're kind of like actually like discussing the topic, which
Yeah.
is an important part, right?
Exactly, yeah.
I think an important part of the United States is between the United States versus Canada. Canada's history has always been accepting everyone.
Yeah.
Canada was, I think, the first nation on earth to recognize the Soviet Union. Right? Just for reference.
Just
we were
for
the
reference.
first ones on earth. And we were the first ones to recognize the Russian Federation after the coup. Right? And we were the first ones to open diplomatic ties with
Yeah.
both nations. Actually, I think we were the first ones with the Russian Empire, but not the Soviet Union.
The Russian, yeah.
But yeah, the Russian Federation now. We were some of the first ones to ever open ties with them. And I think that's an important point of us versus America, because America has spent its entire history blaming the issues on someone. If there was an issue in the States, who do you blame? The Reds. Right? It's always been the Reds. It's always been some enemy. It was the fascists, the Reds, the natives, even the Civil War, where you blame the North versus South, right? The
Yeah.
slaveholders versus non-slaveholders. America has lived its entire life blaming other people and ignoring its internal problems. And when your history has been like that for hundreds of years now,
It becomes the ideology of the whole country.
yeah, it becomes super hard to shake. And I think it's a big difference in why Canada has been such a welcoming place and America's not. Because only a few states in America have really tried to shake that ideology. Like
Yeah.
California, which is probably the most communist state in all of America, right? And many of the New England states, which I
Yeah.
define as like New York. Even Maryland, and
Yeah.
a few ones up there, right? That these few states have tried to distance themselves from the ideology and have tried their best to stop blaming people and be okay with people. And they're doing pretty well. Not
Yeah.
great, but they're doing well. But then you have Canada here to the north, where we've never really had a history of blaming people. We've always made our history on accepting people. And we as Canadians accepted that. Remember, up until maybe even the 80s, Canadians were just Americans with a funny accent, right? Ideologically, societally, we were Americans with a weird accent, right? We defined our own people basically under Pierre Trudeau, but even if you go back further, by Lester B. Pearson, I'd say he was the start of Canadians as they are today.
Yeah.
Where we defined ourselves completely differently because we had to. And I honestly, a lot of people are going to think this is a very controversial statement here, that the government saying this is who we are as Canadians is extremely influential in actually defining who we are as Canadians. And I think that's a very weird statement, because a lot of people always say the government should not have a place in who society is.
Yeah.
But we as society define ourselves so much by our government, by who is in power, by who we put in power, that putting a government in power that is compassionate really empowers the people who are compassionate.
Right.
And we just built a history around that of letting in governments who are friendly and who are welcoming and who are like not aggressive, because we didn't have the resources to be aggressive. And so we've all of a sudden become one of the wealthiest nations on earth, but we've in many ways, but not all, kept that same compassion that you see many other nations undergoing refugee crisis taking.
Right.
Right.
Also, like the point in which, like you stated, the ideology of the country itself has the most important has become the most important fact in this matter, because like if a country has been following something and it has been in their culture or some culture and history, and it's been through ages, then it does form an ideology. But on the other hand, it's not something that needs to be followed regularly and something that cannot be changed.
Yeah.
Even though, like, if the American forefathers or people in their times used to own slaves, then
it's not like we should suddenly do it today.
Exactly, yeah. There was a point in which Lincoln said it's enough. Then slavery got abolished. So I'll say it's if someone or a particular leader himself or in any current period or era, a certain ideology is in practice, it's not like people know that this particular ideology is not suitable for the country and is not, and obviously it's unacceptable, then it's no hard to turn down or change that ideology.
Yeah, and it's definitely an important thing. People tend to follow the leader. The
Exactly.
majority of people don't want to define and be the leader of every single aspect of their life.
Exactly.
Everyone will take points where they say, I don't want control right now.
Yeah.
Right? And this is a very common thing even academically. You see people believing what a teacher says. You don't fact check every single thing a teacher says, because you don't have time, and that's not an area where you wish to have control, where you're willing to to listen instead of to command.
Yeah.
Right? So people like to take command, especially from those that are in power and who are big, powerful, famous people who have influence. Right? It's this weird thing that people are famous only because everyone agrees that person should be famous.
The biggest, I'll say, motivators of people having Trump as the president would say, okay, that man knows how to business. He has a business background. He's a billionaire. He would boost our economy. That should not be the driving force of you electing him as the president.
No, at worst,
At worst.
At best, he should be the minister
Minister
of
of
economics.
Economics, yeah.
Right? And even then, there's also the issue that a business is inwardly growing. It grows.
Yeah.
It doesn't grow the profits for its employees.
Exactly.
It grows the wealth of the business and expands. That's not a very good model for a country that's maintaining itself instead of a country building up. Like, if
Yep.
Canada was still expanding its borders, sure, I would want someone who knows how to run a business controlling the borders, because
Yeah.
at that point, it's a business transaction. It's
Exactly,
getting money,
yeah.
buying new land, taking control of it, administering it. To maintain economy, you need to make the people stronger. You can't run it like a business.
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
Although there are instances where running it like a business can be good, but you need to run it like a small business, a family business, where everyone needs to benefit.
Not your own private or like world business, I'll
And
say.
where, yes, some people can benefit more, right? I'm not going to say we should be full communists and everyone benefit. No, some people can benefit more. That's
Yeah.
okay, but where you don't leave anyone behind.
Exactly,
Right?
yeah.
I think that's an important part. So that's my big argument against letting someone like Trump control the economics, right? It's also why I like how Canada divides its power a lot better than the States,
yeah,
where
exactly,
you
yeah.
do definitely need a Minister of Economics to approve economic decisions. The Prime Minister can't just say, this is our economy now.
Exactly. And in the end, you know that what a ruthless businessman would do, earn
Mm-hmm.
the profits for himself, no matter how he gets them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he, tends to be a little cynical instead of thinking liberally.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a basic
And it's definitely an
point.
important thing. People tend to follow the leader, as we said.
Exactly, yeah.
Having a series of leaders who are accepting and
Yeah.
are open is very different than having a series of leaders who want to enforce your power of democracy, your democratic fist. What was it that President Roosevelt would say? He called himself the bull,
The bull.
right?
Yeah.
American muscle was his
American
word.
muscle,
He wanted to flex American
Theodore
muscle,
Bull,
right?
yeah.
And it's like, when you have a lot of strongman leaders who are very powerful men, you make a country that wants powerful men. When you have a lot of leaders that are compassionate and diplomatic, you make a
Yep.
diplomatic country, right? There's a reason why Canada is one of the diplomatic leaders in the world, because our society very strongly has enforced diplomacy throughout all of its history.
Yep.
Like, even the average person in Canada is a very diplomatic person versus many other countries. We can be a little direct, but we're never harsh.
Never
right?
harsh, yeah.
And sure, in the end, we're all people. And a Canadian moving to America would be a little indistinguishable.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly,
Same
yeah.
if we move to most European countries, besides the accent, right? Because, yeah, we have a weird accent, eh? Like, yes, we do. But when you create a lot of people together, these small differences become massive.
Massive differences.
That's a big thing about Canada.
Exactly, yeah.
This is something I've learned. I'm really big in war history. I'll say that. My degree is computer science, and
Right.
mathematics. My science degree is physics, right? I'm doing like all these pure science things. I love war history.
Oh, me too.
If I had to choose my second field, I would
Yeah.
choose history, specifically war history.
For me, history, particularly pertaining to the United States itself, I have an advanced placement course. I have done an advanced placement course in U.S. history
Yeah.
itself, and I'm thorough with how differently they think and how the thinking has been changed over the centuries because of how the leaders came in, because of how different people from all the backgrounds came in and developed the country itself.
Yeah.
So it's quite an interesting and intriguing.
Yeah, and I really like antiquity and classical history.
Exactly, yeah.
So I like, obviously, I'm one of those nerds who loves the Roman Empire, because everyone loves the Roman Empire. Actually, I love the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire.
Right,
Which
yeah.
is more unique, but still
More
not
unique,
rare.
yeah.
But I love that era of history. There's also a few other countries that I love, but I kind of follow the staples a lot.
Yeah.
But they're staples for a reason, because they're very interesting. And if I've learned one thing about studying military history, is the best general wins without killing a single person.
Yep.
The best general is diplomatic, knows how to play their moves, and knows how to make friends instead of enemies.
Exactly.
Right? Like, you look at someone like Oda Nobunaga from Japan. The Japanese history is fascinating, by the way.
Yep.
The Sengoku Judai, amazing period. Impossible to spell, but just look up the Warring States period in Japan to look it up, for
Yeah.
anyone listening. But, I think that even just that is super interesting to watch, because Oda Nobunaga won almost all of his battles just because he was known for being powerful and because he was willing to work with people. Or look at the Mongols, Genghis Khan. Right?
Oh.
The majority of his empire, he didn't fight. Right?
Yeah.
Now, he did brutalize a lot of people,
Brutalize.
but whenever someone threw open their doors and just joined, he just let them go.
Yeah.
Like they got a huge economic boost because he built a bunch of stuff to make them stronger, right? And which is a very unique thing that Genghis Khan, at his strongest, just didn't fight, right?
Right.
Which is I think that's a very it sounds really weird. But
Yeah, because like Genghis Khan was known to like just
he was known to be
massacre.
brutal,
Yeah.
but some of his like most successes came from not fighting. That
Right.
It only took a little bit of fighting to get what he
I'll
needed.
say the terror,
Yeah.
terror of him itself drove
Mm-hmm.
people away.
Yeah, and there's been plenty of leaders throughout history whose main successes came not from fighting, but from just being very, very smart. And
Oh, you
playing
can
their cards
take
right.
John F. Kennedy himself, like during
Oh,
the
Kennedy, yes.
Cuban Missile
Kennedy
Crisis.
was brilliant in this.
Him thinking and acting in the last moment was the reason there is no third
Yeah.
world war in the country.
So, and I think that really shows that is the energy Canada has kind of worked with,
But
less
I'll
than
say-
America.
It's quite funny and yet ironic on the same place that rulers like that are never let to propagate their ideology or advance in this world.
Yeah.
In the end, it's a sad truth, like their ideology or their thinking or their exclusiveness, it gets dumbed down and not open towards the people around the world. It gets
Yeah.
restricted towards just a certain community or just in their country itself,
Yeah.
rather than getting a global sphere.
Yeah, and the difficulty of that is always because it's so easy to be violent.
Right.
It's so easy for me to say, I hate this person, I want to hurt them. It's really hard for me to say, I hate this person, but I need to work with them and grow and learn to handle them to
Exactly.
get the best for myself.
Yep.
That it's really hard to say, the best for me is also the best for him.
Best for him.
Instead of saying, the best for me is taking what I can. It's so difficult. And honestly, America got really close to also like get it moving on a diplomatic scale.
Right.
They had plenty of diplomatic leaders that were very careful with their diplomacy. Like
Yeah.
building the UN in the first place was a pretty American idea, honestly. It came from the League of Nations, which is also American.
Oh,
but
it's American,
The League of
yeah.
Nations had a few more fundamental issues.
A lot.
A lot. But it was a good start.
Yeah.
Right? And like presidents like John F. Kennedy, he was gone too soon, to be honest. Like he
Yeah.
had the same ideology that many Canadians have now. He was very diplomatic, very open, and
Yep.
sure, he still had the American muscle side effect, but he honestly was more open to diplomacy and working with people
Yeah.
than working against them.
I just always think of the fact, like, had Kennedy been there for his rest of the 2 years, there would have been such phenomenal change in the United States
Yeah.
itself, and I would definitely I can guarantee that he would have gotten a second term as well.
He opened a direct phone line between America and
America
Moscow.
and Moscow, yeah.
That's insane. This was during the Cold War, literally
Exactly,
the
yeah.
hottest point of the Cold War.
Gorbachev could anytime call.
Yeah. Who was the chairman of the Soviet Union during Kennedy's term? It was started with K. I can't remember his name.
It's a class. Sorry, I don't remember, but
Yeah, it starts with K.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have read the name. Yeah, it was just a little weird.
Yeah.
But I think so. I've heard the name, the one
Yeah.
that you're referencing about.
Yeah. Anyway, he was also pretty good, but he had his own
Yeah.
issues. But like he was still like really good on
Right.
this front. But anyway, that went really off track. We are low on time
Yeah.
now. So this is a good place for us to end up and
Yeah,
off
sure.
and say that's about everything. So we didn't come to any conclusions. We kind of just came to an agreement on. In the end, the way that we've been speaking is mainly countries need to prepare themselves and start letting more people in, but the preparation comes first.
Comes
right?
first.
I think that's pretty much how the general feeling of all this
General
has been,
feeling
because
would
we've
be.
been discussing how to create a country that does do it. So that was the public debate for this week. I don't know when the next episode will be, the next recorded episode. It's not a rerun. But yeah. So do you have any closing remarks that you'd like to make?
I'll say it was really fun and interesting and intriguing, a lot intriguing to talk about today's topic, because it was something that needs to be discussed in today's times and needs to be highlighted to the people themselves, because sometimes topics like these don't get much light shed on them, and then they are currently one of the most important things going around the world. Yet we need much more people talking about these topics. So I'm pretty glad that we took this topic today and have had a discussion upon it.
Yeah, definitely a good topic. So that's the end for this today.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining me, of course.
Thanks
Thank you
a lot.
for coming on the show.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, I guess that's everything. Well,
Yep.
I'll see you guys later then.
See ya.